When she took the stage with the triplets by her side and military medals in hand, the entire hall held its breath, and he froze upon recognizing his own eyes in the three children. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Maya Wilson's heels clicked against the marble floor of the upscale cafe on Fifth Avenue, each step echoing her racing heartbeat. She paused at the entrance, studying her reflection in the gilded mirror. At 22, she looked both out of place and determined to belong. Her second-hand blazer carefully ironed, her South Bronx accent meticulously softened after 4 years at Columbia University. "You belong here," she whispered to herself, adjusting the collar of her blouse. "You earned this." Her hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach. The pregnancy test had shown positive 3 days ago. Twins, according to the preliminary ultrasound at the community clinic. 2 lives now depended on this conversation. Maya scanned the cafe, its crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths, a world away from the cramped apartment in the housing project where she'd grown up. Jason Reed was already 15 minutes late. Not surprising. As the heir to the Reed Investments dynasty, Jason operated on a different concept of time. Reed time, as she'd teasingly called it during their 8-month relationship. Her mind drifted to their first meeting at Columbia's library. She'd been buried in biomedical engineering textbooks, calculating stress factors on prosthetic materials when his shadow fell across her notes. "That's not how I'd approach the problem," he'd said, his confident tone carrying the unmistakable cadence of old money. Maya had looked up, ready to defend her work, only to find herself staring into striking amber eyes that gleamed with intelligence and privilege. She'd challenged him to show her a better approach, and he had, brilliantly. What began as an academic rivalry evolved into study sessions, then dinners, then more. A commotion at the entrance snapped Maya back to the present. Jason strode in, impeccably dressed in an Italian suit that probably cost more than her semester's rent. His BlackBerry remained clutched in his hand, his thumb scrolling through messages even as he spotted her and approached. "Sorry I'm late," he offered without looking up. "Board meeting ran long. My father's preparing me to take over the Asia division next year." Maya nodded, her throat suddenly dry. "It's fine. I ordered you an espresso." Jason finally pocketed his phone and slid into the chair opposite her. At 24, he already carried himself with the authority of someone who expected the world to bend to his will. His family had been on Wall Street since there was a Wall Street. "You sounded serious on the phone," he said, studying her face. "Everything okay with your scholarship?" Maya took a deep breath. She'd rehearsed this moment countless times in her tiny bathroom mirror. "Jason, I'm pregnant." The words hung between them like a physical presence. Jason's practiced smile froze, then slowly disappeared. His amber eyes, which had always reminded her of warm honey, turned cold. "You're joking," he said flatly. "Tell me you're joking." Maya reached for his hand across the table. "We're going to have a baby. Actually, the preliminary ultrasound suggests twins." Jason pulled his hand away as if burned. The color drained from his face as he glanced around the cafe, checking if anyone had overheard. "This isn't happening," he muttered, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "This can't be happening." "I know it's unexpected," Maya began. "Unexpected?" Jason's voice remained low but acquired a sharp edge she'd never heard before. "You're talking about derailing my entire future." Maya blinked, the rehearsed speech about their future together dying on her lips. "Our future," she corrected softly. "Our children." Jason leaned forward, his expression shifting from shock to something colder, more calculated. "You can't be serious, Maya. You can't possibly think this would work." "Why not? We've been together 8 months. We've talked about a future. As a diversion, a college romance." Jason's words cut like precision instruments. "You're smart, Maya. Brilliantly smart. That's what attracted me to you. So don't pretend you didn't understand what this was." Maya felt her chest tighten. "What exactly are you saying this was?" Jason sighed, suddenly looking at her with something resembling pity. "You're a scholarship student from the South Bronx. I'm a Reed. My family has expectations." The words landed like blows. Maya sat perfectly still, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach again. "I love you," she said simply. "And I thought—" "You thought what? That my parents would welcome you as their daughter-in-law? A charity case who grew up in a housing project?" Jason's voice remained measured, as if explaining a particularly complex financial concept. This was fun while it lasted, but it was never meant to be permanent. Maya stared at him, seeing for the first time not the man she'd fallen in love with, but a stranger wearing his face. "The ultrasound," she said, her voice barely audible. "It showed twins." Something flickered across Jason's face, panic perhaps, or disgust. Without breaking eye contact, he reached into his suit jacket and removed an Italian leather wallet. With deliberate movements, he extracted a checkbook, uncapped his Mont Blanc pen, and began writing. "Use this to solve your problem," he said, sliding the check across the white tablecloth. "These children will never be part of the Reed legacy. Do you understand? You would never be enough for the world I need to inhabit, and these children would be a mistake I can't afford to make." Maya looked down at the check. The amount made her eyes widen, enough to cover any medical procedure with plenty left over. The implicit message couldn't be clearer. "You want me to terminate the pregnancy," she stated, her voice oddly calm despite the earthquake demolishing her world. "I want you to be practical. You're in your final year at Columbia. You have potential. Why throw it all away?" "Because these are our children." Jason's jaw tightened. "They're a problem, Maya, one that I'm generously helping you solve. Take the check." Maya stared at the slip of paper between them. "And if I don't? Then you're on your own, completely." His voice turned businesslike. "I'll deny everything. It would be your word against mine. And believe me, in this world, a Reed's word carries weight that yours never will." Maya sat motionless, studying the man across from her. The same amber eyes she'd gazed into lovingly now regarded her as an inconvenience to be managed. "I guess I never really knew you," she finally said. Jason checked his watch. "I have another meeting. Keep the check. Use it. Move on with your life." He stood, adjusting his cuffs. "We both know this is the sensible solution." Without waiting for her response, Jason walked out of the cafe, already retrieving his BlackBerry from his pocket. Maya remained seated, staring at the check. The cafe continued around her, waiters delivering delicate pastries, wealthy patrons discussing summer homes and stock portfolios. No one noticed that her world had just collapsed. 20 minutes later, Maya emerged onto Fifth Avenue, the check burning in her pocket like a hot coal. She walked in a daze back to the subway, descending from the gleaming world of Manhattan's elite to the underground reality that would take her back to the Bronx. In her tiny apartment, shared with 2 nursing student roommates, Maya finally allowed herself to cry, silent tears at first, then racking sobs that brought her roommates rushing to her side. "He left you?" Tanya asked, her arm around Maya's shoulders. Maya nodded, unable to form words. "Bastard," Lucia spat. "Those rich boys always do. They slum it with scholarship girls, then run back to their debutantes." In the weeks that followed, Maya moved through Columbia's hallways like a ghost. Whispers followed her, the exemplary scholarship student, about to graduate with honors in biomedical engineering, abandoned by the Reed heir when she got pregnant. Alone at her follow-up appointment at the community clinic, Maya received the final shock. Not twins, but triplets. 3 heartbeats, 3 lives, depending solely on her. That night, Maya sat on her bed, staring at Jason's uncashed check. Her options played on repeat in her mind. The choice he'd suggested so coldly, adoption, or somehow raising 3 children alone while building a career. She dialed her mother in Jamaica, the housekeeper who had worked double shifts for decades to give Maya a chance at education. "Mama, I don't know if I can do this alone," she whispered into the phone. Her mother's voice, tired from a day of cleaning other people's homes, carried a strength that transcended the crackling international connection. "My daughter, if you survived this far, being the first in our family to enter a university, you can do anything. Your children will be your strength, not your weakness." On a spring morning, Maya made her decision. She tore Jason's check into tiny pieces, watching them flutter into the trash can. She abandoned her plans for a corporate internship and accepted a technical position at the Army Research Laboratory, which offered complete medical benefits and maternity leave. Working days and studying nights, Maya completed her degree before the triplets' birth: Thomas, Marcus, and Zoe Wilson. As she watched her children in the small makeshift incubator she'd assembled in her bedroom, Maya made a silent vow. "You will never feel his absence. You will never know what it's like to be disposable. And one day, I'll show the world he was wrong about everything. About me, about you, about what we're capable of becoming." While tearing the check into tiny pieces, Maya couldn't imagine that in 15 years she would be in an elegant Washington, D.C. ballroom, being honored by military and business leaders, while Jason Reed watched from the shadows, finally understanding the value of what he had discarded. The torn pieces of Jason's check fluttered into the trash can like snowflakes, each fragment representing a piece of the life Maya had imagined with him. She stood over the bin, watching the last shreds settle, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach, to the 3 lives growing inside her. "We don't need his money," she whispered. "We don't need him." Maya sank onto her narrow bed, the springs protesting beneath her weight. The cramped bedroom she shared with Lucia seemed to close in around her. Medical textbooks stacked precariously on milk crates, second-hand clothes hung from a rod suspended between 2 walls, the single window overlooking a brick facade across an alleyway. This was her reality, not Fifth Avenue cafes or summer homes in the Hamptons. Sleep eluded her that night as she contemplated her options. By morning, she had made her decision. The corporate internship she'd been pursuing, the one that would have positioned her perfectly for a 6-figure biomedical engineering career, would have to wait. Instead, she'd apply to the Army Research Laboratory position her professor had mentioned. It offered immediate health insurance, maternity leave, and a stable, if modest, income. 3 days later, Maya sat in Columbia's Career Services office, explaining her change in plans to her bewildered advisor. "The ARL position? Maya, that's a waste of your potential," Dr. Winters said, frowning at her computer screen. "Meridian Biotech was ready to offer you their fellowship. That's a direct pipeline to executive leadership." "I need health benefits now," Maya replied, keeping her voice steady, "and maternity leave." The silence that followed was heavy with unasked questions. "I see." Dr. Winters' expression softened. "Jason Reed?" Maya nodded once, her jaw tight. "And he's not—" "He made his position clear." Dr. Winters sighed, removing her glasses. "Maya, you have options. Your whole future. My future includes my children now." Maya's voice remained firm. "All 3 of them." "3?" Dr. Winters couldn't hide her shock. "Triplets." The word hung between them, enormous in its implications. 3 babies. 3 college tuitions. 3 of everything on a single mother's salary. "I'll make the call to ARL today," Dr. Winters finally said. "Their lab director owes me a favor." News traveled quickly through Columbia's campus. Maya felt the stares as she moved between classes, heard the whispers that stopped when she entered rooms. The brilliant scholarship student from the South Bronx, pregnant with triplets, abandoned by her wealthy boyfriend, she had become the cautionary tale mothers warned their daughters about. In advanced biomaterials class, Professor Harrington paused beside her desk. "My office hours are at 4 if you need to discuss accommodations for your situation." The pity in his eyes made Maya's spine stiffen. "Thank you, but I'll complete all assignments as scheduled." That night, she spread research articles across her bed, systematically highlighting key passages despite exhaustion weighing her eyelids. Lucia entered with a mug of ginger tea. "You need rest, Maya. Those babies need you healthy." Maya looked up from her papers. "These babies need me employed and graduated." 2 weeks later, she sat in a sterile waiting room at the community health clinic, surrounded by other women in various stages of pregnancy, most looking as tired and alone as she felt. When the nurse called her name, Maya followed her to the examination room, where an ancient ultrasound machine awaited. "Let's check on those twins," the technician said cheerfully. The cold gel spread across Maya's abdomen. The technician moved the wand, frowning slightly, then adjusting the angle. She murmured. "Let me get Dr. Patel." Maya's heart pounded. Had something happened to the babies? Dr. Patel entered, a petite woman with kind eyes and efficient movements. She took the wand, studied the screen, then looked at Maya. "Ms. Wilson, I'm seeing 3 distinct heartbeats. You're carrying triplets." The room seemed to spin. "Triplets?" "Yes. Identical twins and a fraternal sibling from what I can see." Maya stared at the ceiling, processing this information. Not 2 children, but 3. Not twice the expense and care, but 3 times. The impossibility of it all threatened to overwhelm her. "I understand this is shocking news, Doctor," Patel said gently. "There are options we can discuss." Maya knew what options meant. The same solution Jason had suggested with his checkbook. "No," she said firmly. "No options. Just tell me how to keep them healthy." That night, alone in her room while her roommates worked night shifts at the hospital, Maya dialed the international number she knew by heart. The line crackled with static before her mother's voice came through, musical despite its weariness. "Maya? Is everything okay?" Maya closed her eyes, picturing her mother in the small staff quarters of the Kingston estate where she'd worked as a housekeeper for 20 years. The woman who had raised her alone after her father abandoned them. The woman who had scraped together every dollar for Maya's education. "Mama, I'm pregnant." The words tumbled out. "With triplets. And Jason, he left. He doesn't want them." The silence stretched so long that Maya thought they'd been disconnected. "Mama? I'm here, child." Her mother's voice was calm. So he showed his true self, this rich boy. He offered money to solve the problem. Her mother's derisive sound transcended continence. "Men like that, they think everything has a price. Mama, I don't know if I can do this alone." "My daughter, if you survived this far, being the first in our family to enter a university, you can do anything. Your children will be your strength, not your weakness." Tears slipped down Maya's cheeks. "I'm scared." "Of course you are. But Wilson women, we don't run from fear. We use it." When the call ended, Maya placed her hand on her stomach. "Wilson babies," she whispered. "Wilson's strength." The following week, Maya interviewed at the Army Research Laboratory. She wore her one professional outfit, a navy blazer that barely concealed her thickening waistline. The interviewer, Colonel Richardson, studied her resume with obvious approval. "Your work on stress distribution in composite materials is impressive, Ms. Wilson. Why aren't you pursuing the private sector? The salary would be substantially higher." Maya met his gaze steadily. "The ARL offers stability, meaningful work, and values I believe in. Money isn't everything." He nodded, apparently satisfied. Then his eyes dropped to her midsection, and his expression shifted. "Your background check indicates you're unmarried and expecting." Maya's heart sank. Here it was, the judgment, the rejection. "Triplets, actually," she said, refusing to show weakness. "Due in October." Colonel Richardson leaned back, studying her with new interest. "Triplets? And you still plan to work full-time?" "I don't just plan to work, Colonel. I plan to excel." A smile ghosted across his face. "You know, my mother raised 4 of us alone after my father was killed in Vietnam. Hardest worker I ever knew." He closed her file. "The job is yours if you want it, Ms. Wilson. Our insurance covers dependents from day one." Spring melted into summer. Maya's body changed as her babies grew, but her determination never wavered. She attended morning classes, worked afternoons at the ARL, and studied late into the night. When standing became too uncomfortable, she read textbooks lying on her side. When typing hurt her swelling fingers, she dictated her thesis into a recorder. In her tiny bedroom, she created a makeshift nursery. 3 second-hand bassinets crowded against one wall. A changing table fashioned from a repurposed dresser stood nearby. Onesies and tiny socks, many donated by sympathetic nurses who worked with her roommates, were sorted meticulously in plastic bins. On a sweltering August afternoon, Maya walked across the stage at Columbia's summer graduation ceremony, her pregnant belly prominent beneath her academic gown. As she accepted her diploma in biomedical engineering, she heard scattered but enthusiastic applause. Her roommates, a few professors, Colonel Richardson in the back row. No Reeds attended, no Jason. "Wilson babies," she whispered to her stomach as she returned to her seat. "We did it." 2 months later, in the early hours of a crisp October morning, Thomas, Marcus, and Zoe Wilson were born. Tiny, perfect, and completely hers. Premature but fighting, just like their mother. In the NICU, Maya stood over their incubators, watching their impossibly small chests rise and fall. 3 different nurses had commented on their unusual amber eyes, a genetic trait they couldn't have inherited from her. "You will never feel his absence," she promised softly. "You will never know what it's like to be disposable. And one day, I'll show the world he was wrong about everything. About me, about you, about what we're capable of becoming." While organizing her small home laboratory under the dim kitchen light, Maya had no way of knowing that in a decade her idea for nanomaterials would transform into the foundation of a defense company valued in billions, while the Reed financial empire would face its first major scandal. The night Maya brought the triplets home from the hospital remained etched in her memory. 3 impossibly small bundles, each weighing barely 5 pounds, their translucent skin making the blue veins beneath visible in the dim light of her bedroom. That first night, she hadn't slept at all, watching their chests rise and fall, terrified that if she closed her eyes even for a moment, something would happen to them. 2 years had passed since then. Maya now lived in the perpetual fog of sleep deprivation that all parents of young children knew, but magnified threefold. At 3 in the morning, she sat in the rocking chair that had been her sole splurge, a second-hand wooden rocker with worn armrests, cradling Thomas as he fussed with teething pain. Marcus and Zoe slept soundly in their converted cribs, wooden packing crates carefully sanded, painted white, and fitted with small mattresses that she'd found at a church donation center. "Shh, baby," she whispered, pressing a cool, teething ring against Thomas's inflamed gums. In her lap, balanced precariously against Thomas's kicking feet, lay the latest Journal of Material Sciences, open to an article on impact-resistant composites. Maya's eyes scanned the text while swaying rhythmically, her mind simultaneously processing molecular structures and monitoring her son's temperature. 4 hours later, Maya stood at the door of Mrs. Guzman's apartment, the elderly widow who watched the triplets while she worked. The goodbye was always the hardest part of her day. As she handed over the 3 diaper bags, each meticulously packed with bottles, changes of clothes, and identical stuffed lambs that smelled like Maya, Zoe began to wail, her tiny hands reaching for her mother. "Mama, stay," she pleaded, her amber eyes, so like Jason's, filling with tears. Maya knelt, pressing her forehead against her daughter's. "Mama has to work so we can have nice things. I'll be back before you know it." In the elevator, alone, Maya allowed herself exactly 15 seconds of tears. By the time she reached the lobby, her face was composed, professional. She had mastered the art of compartmentalization, mother at home, scientist at work, with no overlap permitted. At the Army Research Laboratory, Maya's desk was tucked into a corner of the materials testing division. Around her, mostly male colleagues worked on projects involving ballistic protection, communications equipment, and vehicle armor. As the newest and youngest member of the team, with only a bachelor's degree when most had PhDs, Maya had initially been assigned the most basic tasks: logging test results, organizing samples, preparing standardized reports. That morning, a shipment arrived from Iraq. Damaged equipment returned for failure analysis. Maya watched as her supervisor, Dr. Harlow, distributed pieces to senior engineers for evaluation. "Wilson, log these in, would you?" he said, dropping a box of shredded body armor on her desk. "Yes, sir." Maya began the meticulous process of documenting each damaged piece, photographing the entry and exit points, measuring the depth of penetration. As she worked, patterns emerged, failures consistently occurring along certain seam lines, penetration depths varying based on impact angle. During lunch, while colleagues chatted in the break room, Maya returned to her desk with a sandwich, spreading her observations alongside the official testing protocols. The inconsistencies were obvious to her trained eye. The armor was failing predictably in ways the laboratory tests hadn't anticipated. For weeks, Maya documented these patterns, staying late after retrieving the triplets and putting them to bed. At her small kitchen table, converted to a workspace once the children were asleep, she analyzed data and sketched alternative designs by the light of a single lamp, careful not to wake the babies sleeping just feet away. The midnight routine became her secret laboratory. Sips of cold coffee sustained her as she laid out diagrams of molecular structures, calculating stress distributions and impact dispersion with the intensity of someone who understood that lives depended on her accuracy. When exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, she would glance at the 3 cribs where her children slept, finding renewed purpose in their peaceful breathing. 20 minutes, she would whisper to herself, setting the timer on her ancient microwave. She'd rest her head on her folded arms, training herself to wake automatically when the triplets might need their next feeding or changing. 3 months into this routine, Maya approached Dr. Harlow's office, clutching a folder of meticulously organized data. "Do you have a moment, sir? I've noticed something in the field failure patterns." Dr. Harlow glanced up, irritation flashing across his face. "Wilson, this isn't your assignment." "I know, sir, but the current armor design has a fundamental flaw in the fiber orientation. It's causing catastrophic failures when impacts occur at oblique angles." "That's beyond your expertise," he dismissed, returning to his computer. "Leave the analysis to the senior team." Maya retreated, but she didn't give up. Each night, after feeding, bathing, and reading to her children, she would return to her makeshift laboratory. From the workshop at the ARL, she borrowed small samples of materials, Kevlar scraps, experimental fibers, resin compounds, signing them out for disposal but bringing them home instead. On her kitchen table, she constructed miniature versions of her design, testing them with improvised equipment. When Marcus cried out from a nightmare at 2 in the morning, she would scoop him up, settling him against her chest while continuing to make notes one-handed, his small head nestled under her chin. The triplets, now toddling around the apartment, became unwitting participants in her research. Thomas demonstrated remarkable coordination, stacking blocks in precise arrangements that sometimes mirrored Maya's molecular diagrams. Marcus, quieter and more observant, would study patterns in fabric or tile with uncommon intensity. Zoe, the most verbal, already attempted to repeat scientific terms Maya used during her work. "This is tensile strength," Maya would explain, showing Zoe how a string could hold weight. "And this is compression." The toddlers absorbed these lessons like sponges, their developing brains mapping connections Maya couldn't yet imagine. 6 months into her secret project, Maya finally saw her opportunity. Colonel Richardson, who had originally hired her and since been promoted to oversee the Protective Equipment Division, was scheduled to visit the laboratory. During his tour, Maya positioned herself near the testing area, waiting until he approached. "Colonel Richardson," she said, stepping forward with more confidence than she felt. "I have something I believe would interest you regarding the field failures." The colonel, remembering the pregnant student he'd taken a chance on, paused. "Wilson, isn't it? How are those triplets?" "Thriving, sir, like my research." Her boldness earned her 5 minutes in a side office, 5 minutes to present months of midnight work. Maya laid out her findings succinctly, explaining how a simple reorientation of fibers combined with a nanomaterial interlayer could reduce weight by 60% while increasing protection. "Where did you develop this?" he asked, studying her prototype with growing interest. "On my kitchen table, sir, after hours." The colonel's eyebrows rose. "You did this with 3 toddlers at home?" "Because of them, sir. Every life saved by better armor means another child doesn't lose a parent." 2 weeks later, Colonel Richardson appeared unannounced at Maya's apartment building. When she opened the door, still in her work clothes but with a toddler balanced on each hip and another clutching her leg, his expression shifted from professional curiosity to genuine respect. "I wanted to see where miracle armor gets invented," he said, taking in the cramped living space, the kitchen table covered with papers and material samples, the makeshift cribs visible in the bedroom beyond. Maya shifted Thomas to her other hip. "Would you like to come in, sir?" "It's not much, but it's remarkable," he interrupted, "like the woman who lives here." The next day, an official letter arrived on Maya's desk. The United States Army was pleased to offer support for her master's program in materials engineering with a focus on protective systems development. Her work schedule would be adjusted to accommodate classes, and her project would be given official developmental status. At home that night, Maya gathered her children in a tight embrace on their worn sofa. "Mama has good news," she told them, though at 2 years old, they couldn't possibly understand the significance. "Good news," Zoe repeated, clapping her tiny hands. Maya watched as Thomas methodically stacked blocks in a perfect tower, his small fingers placing each one with unusual precision. Across the room, Marcus had arranged his colored rings in a pattern that followed perfect mathematical progression, while Zoe studied a picture book, already recognizing simple words. "You are all extraordinary," Maya whispered, overwhelmed by both pride and responsibility. When Thomas's tower collapsed and his face crumpled in preparation for tears, Maya knelt beside him. "When something falls down, we build it again, stronger. That's what Wilsons do." "Build gain," Thomas repeated solemnly, reaching for another block. While organizing her small laboratory under the dim kitchen light, Maya had no way of knowing that in a decade her idea for nanomaterials would transform into the foundation of a defense company valued in billions, while the Reed financial empire would face its first major scandal. 5 years had transformed Maya Wilson's life in ways she couldn't have imagined that night at her kitchen table, surrounded by borrowed materials and sleeping toddlers. Now 32, she stood before a room of military officers, her captain's bars gleaming on her uniform as she presented the final test results for her revolutionary body armor. "As you can see, gentlemen," Maya gestured toward the screen displaying impact data. "The nanomaterial interlayer absorbs and disperses kinetic energy 40% more efficiently than current issue armor, while reducing overall weight by 60%. The room remained silent, 20 pairs of male eyes studying her with expressions ranging from skepticism to curiosity. Maya had grown accustomed to being the only woman in these meetings, just as she'd grown accustomed to being the only single mother in her master's program and now in her doctoral studies. General Brooks, who had initially dismissed her research, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. "These results seem optimistic, Captain Wilson. Are you certain your testing protocols were standard?" Maya met his gaze without flinching. "The protocols were not only standard, sir, but exceeded requirements by implementing additional field analog conditions. The report includes verification from 3 independent laboratories." At the back of the room, Colonel Richardson, now General Richardson, suppressed a smile. He'd watched Maya's rise through the ranks with the same determination she showed raising her children. Her technical skills had earned her a direct commission as an officer in the Army's Technical Corps 3 years ago, a rare achievement for someone who hadn't attended military academy. After the presentation, Maya gathered her materials as the officers filed out, many still discussing her findings in hushed tones. General Richardson approached, waiting until they were alone. "Impressive work, Captain. Your promotion to Major will be finalized next month." Maya's eyes widened. "Sir? The paperwork's already been submitted. Your armor design is being fast-tracked for Special Forces deployment." He paused, studying her face. "How are those remarkable children of yours?" Maya's professional demeanor softened slightly. "They're 7 now, sir, and they're—" She searched for a word that wouldn't sound like maternal exaggeration. "Exceptional." Back at home, a modest but slightly larger apartment in a better neighborhood, Maya opened the door to organized chaos. Mrs. Rodriguez, the retired teacher who now watched the triplets after school, greeted her with obvious relief. "Thomas organized the entire bookshelf by subject and author," she reported. "Marcus completed next month's math assignments in one sitting, and Zoe has written what she calls a scientific poem about birds' wing structures." Maya thanked her, waiting until the door closed before kneeling to embrace her children as they raced toward her. At 7, they were distinct individuals with shared features. All 3 had those unmistakable amber eyes, a daily reminder of Jason Reed's genetic contribution and nothing more. "Mama, I devised a more efficient system for our books," Thomas reported, standing at attention like the little soldier he already aspired to be. "The math problems were too simple," Marcus complained quietly. "They don't challenge my capabilities." Zoe thrust a paper covered in neat handwriting toward Maya. "I combined ornithology, physics, and iambic pentameter." Maya hugged them tightly, marveling at these small humans who had once fit in the crook of her arm. "I missed you all day. Let's make dinner together, and you can tell me everything." Their evening routine had military precision: homework review, dinner preparation, bath time, reading, bed, with each child assuming assigned responsibilities. Thomas led his siblings in setting the table, Marcus calculated exact portions for balanced nutrition, and Zoe documented their day in journals Maya had started for them when they were born. After tucking them in, Maya retreated to her small home office, a luxury she'd only recently been able to afford. On her desk sat the official letter announcing her upcoming promotion to major. Beside it lay a stack of reports from the triplets' school, all recommending advanced placement and specialized programs for gifted children that the public school couldn't provide. Maya rubbed her temples, calculating budgets in her head. Her military salary and research stipend were stable but modest. The promotion would help, but 3 gifted children required resources she still struggled to provide. The next morning, Maya sat rigid in her uniform as doctor. Harlow, now technically her subordinate despite his doctorate, explained why her armor design needed further refinement before full implementation. "The weight reduction is impressive," he conceded, "but the manufacturing process you've proposed is unconventional." "Unconventional doesn't mean ineffective," Maya countered. "Every test confirms the superiority of this design." "Captain Wilson," he said, emphasizing her rank as if it were a limitation rather than an achievement, "with all due respect, this project requires a certain institutional experience that you simply haven't had time to develop. Perhaps if you weren't dividing your attention between work and domestic responsibilities." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Maya felt a familiar heat rising in her chest, the same burning indignation she'd felt when Jason suggested her background made her insufficient for his world. "My domestic responsibilities, as you call them, have never compromised my work," she said evenly. "In fact, they're the reason I understand what's really at stake when armor fails in the field. Every soldier is someone's child." Later that day, Maya was summoned to a secured briefing room. Inside, she found General Richardson with 3 men she didn't recognize, 2 in army dress uniforms with the insignia of the Rangers, and 1 in a tailored suit that screamed government intelligence. "Captain Wilson," Richardson began, "2 weeks ago, a Ranger unit in Afghanistan walked into an ambush. They were the first squad equipped with your prototype armor." He paused, and Maya's heart froze. All 6 members survived direct hits that would have been fatal with standard equipment. One of the Rangers stepped forward. "Ma'am, I commanded that unit. My men are alive because of your work. We're here to personally thank you." That evening, the triplets noticed something different in their mother's demeanor as she helped with homework at the kitchen table. She seemed lighter, her smile reaching her eyes in a way they rarely witnessed. "Did something good happen, Mama?" Zoe asked, her intuition sharp as always. Maya looked at her children, these miraculous beings who had been deemed a problem to be solved, now showing intelligence and character that left teachers speechless. "Yes," she said simply. "I helped save some lives today." The following week, Maya stood nervously at the podium of the National Defense Contractors Association conference. As a last-minute replacement speaker, she hadn't expected the massive audience of industry executives, military officials, and government representatives. Her presentation on next-generation protective systems captured immediate attention. The questions afterward were technical, challenging, and occasionally tinged with the skepticism she'd grown accustomed to facing as both a woman and a relatively junior officer in a field dominated by men with decades of experience. When a silver-haired executive asked pointedly about her limited field experience, Maya responded with calm precision. "My design innovations aren't theoretical, sir. They've already saved lives in Helmand Province. While I respect traditional development pathways, I believe results speak louder than resumes." The room erupted in approving murmurs. As Maya gathered her materials after the presentation, she found herself surrounded by business cards and handshakes, executives from major defense contractors suddenly eager to discuss potential collaborations. One distinguished man in an impeccably tailored suit waited until the others had dispersed. "Captain Wilson, James Harrington, Axiom Defense Systems. Have you considered private sector opportunities? Your innovations could reach more service members faster with the right corporate partner." The salary he casually mentioned was 7 times her current income. That night, Maya sat with the triplets on their small balcony, looking at the stars as she helped them identify constellations. Thomas, always the most perceptive about people's emotions, leaned against her shoulder. "Are you making a big decision, Mama?" "You have your thinking face on." Maya smiled, pulling him closer. "How did you get so smart?" "Genetics and environment," Marcus answered seriously from her other side. "Though current research suggests environmental factors may be more significant than previously estimated." Zoe, curled in Maya's lap, looked up with those piercing amber eyes. "Are we moving again? Will we have our own rooms this time?" Maya stroked her daughter's hair. "Not yet, but someday soon, I promise." She looked at each of them, these brilliant children who deserved every opportunity. "We need to talk about something important. For the first time, someone asked about your father today." The triplets exchanged glances, a silent communication they'd developed almost from infancy. "What did you tell them?" Thomas asked. "The truth, that he chose not to be part of our lives." Marcus nodded, processing this information with his usual analytical detachment. Statistically, children from single-parent households can achieve equal or superior outcomes compared to dual-parent environments, given sufficient educational support and emotional stability. Maya bit back a smile at his textbook response. "That's true, but I want you to know that if you have questions about him, you can always ask me." "Does he know about us?" Zoe's question was quiet but direct. Yes, he knew. He made his choice. Thomas straightened, his young face serious. "Then we don't need him. We have you." The next morning, An official letter arrived at Maya's desk. The patent office had approved her application for the nanomaterial armor design, with her name listed as primary inventor. As she traced her fingers over the embossed seal, an email notification appeared on her screen, an invitation to present her research at the Pentagon. While guardedly putting away her first patent in her desk drawer, Maya didn't imagine that this document would be just the first of 73, or that in a decade Jason Reed would be desperately trying to do business with the company she had not yet dreamed of founding. While guardedly putting away her first patent in her desk drawer, Maya didn't imagine that this document would be just the first of 73, or that in a decade Jason Reed would be desperately trying to do business with the company she had not yet dreamed of founding. 3 years later, that future arrived faster than anyone could have predicted. Maya Wilson stood at the window of the executive suite at Axiom Defense Systems, watching rain streak across the glass. Behind her, James Harrington, CEO of the third-largest defense contractor in America, waited with practiced patience as she considered his offer. $5 million for exclusive rights to your patents, he repeated, tapping his Mont Blanc pen against the leather portfolio. Plus a director position heading our materials division at $400,000 annually. Maya's reflection stared back at her from the rain-slicked window. Captain Maya Wilson, soon to be Major, in her perfectly pressed uniform with her hair in a regulation bun. She barely recognized the woman she'd become. At 30, with a completed doctorate and 7 groundbreaking patents to her name, she stood at a crossroads. "It's a generous offer," she said, turning back to face Harrington. Something in his confident smile reminded her of Jason Reed, the casual certainty of someone who believed money could buy anything of value. "More than generous," Harrington corrected. "It's life-changing, for you and those remarkable children of yours." Maya's phone vibrated in her pocket, a text from Thomas, now 10 years old. "Marcus calculated the probability of your meeting ending on time at 62%. Dinner preparations proceeding accordingly." "Mr. Harrington," Maya said, pocketing her phone, "what happens to my communication system design if Axiom acquires it?" Harrington leaned back, his confidence unwavering. "We'd integrate it into our existing product lines, of course. Probably modify it to work with our proprietary platforms. Even though those modifications would reduce its effectiveness by nearly 30%? His smile tightened slightly. "Our shareholders expect maximum return on investment. Some performance compromises are unavoidable." Maya nodded. "Thank you for your time. I'll need to consider your offer." That evening, Maya met with General Richardson at a quiet cafe near the Pentagon. His weathered face broke into a rare smile as she approached. "Heard Axiom made you quite the offer today," he said as she sat down. Maya raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast." "In this town? At light speed." Richardson stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "You turning it down was even more interesting. I haven't officially declined yet. But you will." It wasn't a question. "I've watched you for 8 years, Wilson. You don't work for money. You work for results." Maya stared into her untouched tea. $5 million would secure my children's future. Private schools, college funds, a house with enough space. Those kids don't need money to succeed. They have you." Richardson leaned forward. "What they need is to see their mother fulfill her potential, not sell it short. What's the alternative? I've gone as far as I can within the military research structure." Richardson's eyes gleamed. "Start your own company. Your patents, your rules, your vision, undiluted." Maya nearly laughed. "With what capital? My savings wouldn't cover incorporation fees. You'd be surprised what doors open when you have the right ideas." He slid a business card across the table. "My brother-in-law's a contract lawyer for defense startups. Talk to him." Back at her apartment, Maya found the triplets gathered around the dining table. Thomas had organized dinner with military precision. Plates aligned perfectly, napkins folded into precise triangles. Marcus was explaining probability theory to Mrs. Rodriguez, who nodded with the glazed expression of someone completely lost but too polite to say so. Zoe had created elaborate illustrated place cards for everyone. "Mama!" Zoe ran to embrace her. "We calculated you had a 98% chance of making the correct decision today." Maya blinked in surprise. "And what decision was that?" "Not selling your ideas to people who would change them," Thomas said confidently. "How could you possibly know what I was considering?" Marcus adjusted his glasses. "You received 3 calls from unknown numbers during school hours, which correlates with corporate acquisition patterns. You also requested your patent documentation last week, indicating potential transfer preparation." Maya shook her head, amazed once again by her children's perceptiveness. "When did you 3 become corporate analysts?" "We researched after you mentioned the Axiom meeting," Thomas explained. "We know how important your work is." After dinner, with the children engrossed in their advanced studies, Maya spread financial documents across her small desk. Her savings, $62,000. Army pension potential, decades away. Current patents, 7, with 3 more pending. On a blank page, she wrote, "Wilson Defense Technologies," and drew a circle around it. "Starting with nothing," she whispered. Again. 2 weeks later, Maya sat at her dining table surrounded by incorporation papers, patent assignments, and business registration forms. The triplets, fascinated by the birth of a company, had appointed themselves junior executives. "I've developed our filing system," Thomas announced, showing her color-coded folders organized with military precision. "I've analyzed optimal banking arrangements," Marcus added, presenting a spreadsheet comparing interest rates and fee structures. Zoe held up design sketches. "I created our logo. It's a triangle for the 3 of us, with your initials in the center because you're our core." Maya signed the final document establishing Wilson Defense Technologies as a legal entity, the children witnessing the moment with solemn expressions. With that signature, she committed her last $50,000 to an uncertain future. "Now we need clients," she said, more to herself than to them. "What about Captain Rodriguez?" Thomas suggested. "He always said your communication system would revolutionize special operations." Maya's first prototype of the undetectable communications system had been built on this very table, with parts borrowed from the Army lab and assembled during late nights after the children were asleep. It used quantum entanglement principles to create unhackable, untraceable connections between field operatives. That night, after tucking the triplets in, Maya called her former colleague, now commanding a Special Forces unit. 3 days later, she demonstrated her system to 6 stone-faced officers in a secured facility at Fort Bragg. As they tested the equipment, attempting to intercept or jam the signals without success, Maya maintained professional detachment despite her racing heart. "How soon could you deliver a field-ready version?" the lead officer finally asked. 3 months, with proper funding." "And your larger competitors? How close are they to this capability?" "At least 2 years behind," Maya answered confidently. "Possibly more." The return to her apartment, to celebrating with ice cream alongside 3 excited children who understood the significance of this first potential contract, made the contrast between her professional and personal worlds stark. Wilson Defense Technologies operated from her dining table, with borrowed equipment and improvised testing facilities, yet was poised to revolutionize military communications. 1 month into development, disaster struck. The contracting officer called with news that made Maya's blood run cold. "I'm sorry, Captain Wilson, but we've received concerning information about your company's capability to deliver. Vanguard Defense has submitted documentation suggesting your technology is unproven and potentially unstable in field conditions." Maya recognized the tactic immediately. Vanguard, a defense giant, had tried to hire her twice. Now they were sabotaging her to either force her hand or steal her innovation. That evening, the triplets found their mother surrounded by technical specifications and testing protocols. "They're trying to steal my work," she explained, not bothering to shield them from reality. "They've convinced the military that our system won't function in combat conditions. Then we'll prove them wrong," Thomas said simply. For the next week, the Wilson family operated as a unified team. Thomas organized documentation proving the system's development history. Marcus analyzed technical objections and formulated mathematical rebuttals. Zoe created clear, compelling visual presentations demonstrating the technology's effectiveness. Maya called in every favor she'd earned during her military career. A former commanding officer arranged a live demonstration for the Joint Special Operations Command. A colleague now working in procurement helped expedite security clearances for the testing. The day of the demonstration, Maya stood calmly as her system was subjected to extreme conditions: signal jamming, environmental stressors, physical damage. Across the room, Vanguard's representative watched with growing discomfort as their competing system failed one test after another while Maya's performed flawlessly. 2 days later, her phone rang as she helped the triplets with homework. "Major Wilson? This is Colonel Hayes from Procurement. The Department of Defense would like to discuss a $7 million initial contract for your communication system." The triplets, hearing her gasp, looked up expectantly. That night, they celebrated with pizza on their small balcony, the children bubbling with excitement about the future of Wilson Defense Technologies. "Will we have a real office now?" Zoe asked, eyes wide. Maya looked at her children, these remarkable beings who had been her strength through every challenge. "Yes, and someday, a building with our name on it." "Can I design my own laboratory?" Marcus asked. "Eventually," Maya promised, knowing that this first contract was just the beginning. As the children chattered about future innovations, Maya hired her first 2 employees the next day, former military colleagues who believed in her vision and were willing to work in her living room until proper facilities could be secured. While signing her first government contract on the kitchen table, Maya couldn't have predicted that in just 5 years Wilson Defense Technologies would occupy an entire building in Arlington with over 1,000 employees and contracts that would make Jason Reed and his Wall Street colleagues look with envy at the empire she had built from nothing. While signing her first government contract on the kitchen table, Maya couldn't have predicted that in just 5 years, Wilson Defense Technologies would occupy an entire building in Arlington with over 1,000 employees and contracts that would make Jason Reed and his Wall Street colleagues look with envy at the empire she had built from nothing. 5 years passed in a blur of growth, challenges, and triumphs. The Wilson Defense Technologies headquarters in Arlington stood as a testament to Maya's vision. 7 stories of gleaming glass and steel, housing state-of-the-art laboratories, testing facilities, and over 1,000 employees. Maya, now 35 and recently promoted to lieutenant colonel in her reservist role, guided a group of potential investors through the Advanced Materials Lab, her tailored suit a far cry from the threadbare blazer she'd worn to interviews a decade ago. "This floor alone represents over $200 million in research investment," she explained, gesturing toward engineers working behind glass walls. "Our lightweight tactical armor now protects 80% of special operations personnel worldwide." In the executive conference room on the top floor, Maya concluded her presentation to impressed murmurs. Behind her, large windows offered a panoramic view of the Potomac, while the walls displayed framed patents alongside photographs of the triplets at various ages. The juxtaposition wasn't accidental. Her children and her innovations represented intertwined legacies. "Lieutenant Colonel Wilson," said a silver-haired venture capitalist, "your company's growth trajectory is unprecedented in the defense sector. What's your projection for next quarter?" Before Maya could answer, her phone vibrated with a message from Thomas. "Acceptance letter arrived from West Point Preparatory. First step complete." Maya smiled, the pride momentarily overriding her professional demeanor. "Excuse me, gentlemen. It appears my son just received some significant news." That evening, Maya arrived home to their comfortable townhouse in Alexandria, modest by the standards of someone running a multi-million-dollar company, but luxurious compared to the cramped apartments of their early years. Thomas, now 13 and already displaying the bearing of a future officer, met her at the door, letter in hand. "I got in," he said simply, amber eyes bright with restrained excitement. "The same preparatory academy that General Westmoreland attended." Maya embraced him tightly. "I never doubted you would." Marcus appeared from the study, a tablet displaying complex equations in his hand. "The probability was 97.3% given his academic performance and leadership scores," he offered matter-of-factly. "Also, I've been invited to present at the Quantum Computing Symposium next month. The organizers made an age exception. At 13, Marcus had already published a peer-reviewed paper on quantum entanglement that had caught the attention of MIT professors. His genius with theoretical physics sometimes left even Maya struggling to follow his reasoning. From upstairs came the sound of jubilant shouting, followed by Zoe bounding down the stairs, her tablet clutched to her chest like a precious artifact. "I won!" she exclaimed, thrusting the device toward Maya. "First place in the National Young Engineers Competition!" The screen displayed Zoe's winning design, an elegant drone propulsion system that minimized energy consumption while maximizing stability. At 13, she combined Maya's practical engineering skill with an artistic sensibility all her own. Later that night, after a celebration dinner, Maya sat in her home office reviewing quarterly projections while the triplets worked on their advanced studies in the adjacent family room. Through the open door, she could hear them discussing Thomas's upcoming school transition, their voices a comforting soundtrack to her evening work. A notification popped up on her screen, another profile request from Forbes magazine, the third this month. Maya had consistently declined interviews, preferring to let WDT's innovations speak for themselves, but the most recent request mentioned featuring her family's extraordinary journey, celebrating the triplets' achievements alongside her own. Maya closed her laptop and walked to the doorway, observing her children. Thomas was meticulously planning his preparatory academy schedule in a leather-bound planner. Marcus had fallen asleep amid quantum physics textbooks, his glasses askew. Zoe sketched engineering concepts while humming softly to herself. A wave of emotion swept over Maya, pride, love, and a sudden certainty that the time had come for a conversation she'd been postponing. "Children," she said softly, "we need to talk about something important." The seriousness in her tone brought immediate attention. Thomas closed his planner, Marcus straightened his glasses, and Zoe set aside her sketches. They gathered in the living room, instinctively sensing the gravity of the moment. Maya retrieved a small metal box from her office safe. Sitting on the sofa, children gathered around her. She opened it to reveal carefully preserved memories, her Columbia acceptance letter, her first patent certificate, and an envelope containing pieces of a check, meticulously taped together. "There's something about your father that you need to know," she began, her voice steady. "Something I've been waiting until you were old enough to fully understand." She removed the reconstructed check from its envelope, handling it like a dangerous artifact. "This is what your father gave me when I told him I was pregnant with you." The triplets leaned forward, examining the faded paper. The amount written, $50,000, and the elegant signature at the bottom, Jason Reed. "He told me to solve the problem," Maya continued, the memory still sharp despite 13 years of distance. "He said you would never be part of the Reed legacy, that I would never be enough for his world, and that you three would be a mistake he couldn't afford to make." The room fell silent. Thomas's posture stiffened, his shoulders squaring as if preparing for battle. Marcus studied the check with analytical detachment, though his fingers trembled slightly. Zoe's eyes filled with tears that she refused to let fall. "I've kept this all these years," Maya explained, "not out of bitterness, but as a reminder of the moment that defined our path." Thomas was the first to speak, his voice unusually deep for a 13-year-old. "He made you stronger, and he made us who we are." Marcus nodded, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Statistically, families with two parents frequently limit the mother's potential achievement. His absence created optimal conditions for your success." Zoe reached for Maya's hand. "The best present he gave us was leaving. so we could have you entirely to ourselves." Maya looked at her children, astonished once again by their wisdom and resilience. Where she had expected anger or sadness, she found acceptance and even gratitude. "You're not curious about him?" she asked gently. "We researched him years ago," Marcus admitted. "Reed Investments is currently valued at approximately $8 billion. Their quarterly reports indicate substantial assets but limited innovation." "He has 2 ex-wives," Thomas added, "and a reputation for high employee turnover." "We wanted to understand what kind of person would walk away from you," Zoe explained. "It doesn't make logical sense." Maya carefully returned the check to its envelope. "Sometimes people make choices based on fear rather than courage. Your father chose what seemed safe and familiar. He couldn't see the value of what he was giving up." The following morning, Maya's assistant forwarded a call from an unexpected source. "Lieutenant Colonel Wilson, this is Catherine Marsden from Forbes. We'd like to feature you on our cover, The Mother Warrior, How Maya Wilson Built a Defense Empire While Raising Genius Triplets." Maya hesitated, her habitual privacy warring with a new certainty that their story deserved to be told. "I'll need final approval on the article," she said finally, "and my children must be comfortable with their inclusion." 2 weeks later, Maya stood in the WDT lobby with the triplets, all dressed in formal attire for the Forbes photo shoot. As the photographer positioned them against the company logo, Maya felt a profound sense of completion. The Wilson legacy wasn't built on generations of inherited wealth, but on determination, intelligence, and love that had transformed rejection into triumph. While posing for the Forbes cover photo, Maya didn't imagine that the magazine would reach Jason Reed's hands during his flight to Washington, D.C., where he would see for the first time the faces of the children he'd rejected, faces that strikingly reflected his own aristocratic Reed features, but emanated the unshakable strength of the Wilsons. While posing for the Forbes cover photo, Maya didn't imagine that the magazine would reach Jason Reed's hands during his flight to Washington, D.C., where he would see for the first time the faces of the children he'd rejected, faces that strikingly reflected his own aristocratic Reed features, but emanated the unshakable strength of the Wilsons. The morning of the awards ceremony dawned with crisp autumn clarity over Washington, D.C. Maya stood before the mirror in her hotel suite, methodically adjusting the insignia on her dress uniform. At 37, Lieutenant Colonel Maya Wilson carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from building something extraordinary from nothing. Her fingers traced the row of medals adorning her chest, each one a milestone in a journey that began at a cafe table on Fifth Avenue 15 years ago. A soft knock at the door preceded Thomas's entrance. At nearly 15, he already stood at 6 feet, his lanky frame filling out the custom-tailored tuxedo with a military bearing that came naturally to him. "Need help with that tie?" Maya asked, turning from the mirror. Thomas nodded, his amber eyes, so like his father's, serious as they always were before important events. "West Point requires perfection in these matters." Maya stepped forward, adjusting his bow tie with practiced movements. This closeness, these quiet moments of connection, had sustained them through years of challenge. Her mind flashed back to adjusting his tiny onesies in their cramped Bronx apartment, marveling at how time had transformed her tiny premature baby into this impressive young man. "Nervous about tonight?" she asked, smoothing his lapels. "Less than you were when you presented your first prototype to the Pentagon," Thomas replied with a hint of a smile. The easy reference to their shared history warmed Maya's heart. Her children had witnessed every step of her journey, participating in ways most executives' children never would. Thomas had organized her files, Marcus had verified her calculations, and Zoe had sketched early designs, all before they were 10 years old. Marcus emerged from the adjoining room, absorbed in his tablet. At 14, he'd already completed most of his master's coursework in quantum physics at MIT, his genius earning him special dispensation to attend while still technically a minor. The probability of the Secretary of Defense announcing the Taiwanese defense contract tonight is approximately 78%, he announced without preamble, pushing his glasses up his nose. I've analyzed his previous speeches for linguistic patterns indicating major announcements. Zoe appeared beside him, elegant in a midnight blue gown that complemented her amber eyes. Or we could just enjoy the evening without calculating everything, she suggested, nudging her brother playfully. Her recent acceptance to Harvard with a full scholarship had only intensified her confidence. Maya observed her children with quiet pride. They stood together, these three extraordinary young people who were never supposed to exist, according to Jason Reed. Three distinct personalities united by brilliance, determination, and an unshakable bond forged through years of being each other's entire world. Her phone chimed with a message from her executive assistant. Maya glanced at the screen and froze, her composure momentarily cracking. "Mom? What is it?" Zoe asked, immediately attuned to the shift in Maya's energy. Maya set the phone down carefully, her mind racing. "It seems we'll have an unexpected guest at tonight's ceremony." The triplets exchanged glances, that silent communication they'd perfected from infancy. "Who?" Thomas asked, though something in his expression suggested he already suspected. "Jason Reed," Maya said simply. "He's confirmed his attendance." The room fell silent. This moment, the possibility of encountering the man who'd rejected them before they were born, had hovered in the background of their lives for 15 years. Marcus was the first to respond, approaching the situation with his characteristic analytical detachment. Statistically predictable, Reed Investments has been attempting to diversify into defense contracting for approximately 18 months. Your award and the potential contract announcements would make this a logical networking opportunity. "He doesn't know we'll be there," Zoe said, her intuition sharp as always. "Does he?" Maya shook her head. "I doubt it. The guest list isn't public and he's a last-minute addition." Thomas's posture straightened further, his protective instincts visible in the set of his shoulders. "It doesn't matter. He's irrelevant to us." Maya moved to the sitting area of the suite, gesturing for the triplets to join her. This conversation required the same careful handling she'd applied to sensitive military operations. "We should discuss how to handle this," she said calmly. "There's a high probability he'll recognize me, and when he sees you three together, he'll see his eyes staring back at him," Zoe finished softly. Maya nodded. "The Reed amber eyes are distinctive, and genetics have given you three more than just that." She opened her tablet and pulled up a recent photo of Jason Reed from the Wall Street Journal. The triplets studied it with scientific curiosity, the man who had contributed half their DNA but nothing to their upbringing. "He's aged," Marcus observed dispassionately. "Stress indicators around the eyes suggest poor work-life balance." "3 marriages," Thomas added, having researched their biological father years ago out of tactical interest rather than emotional need. "The current wife is 22 years younger. He's trying to diversify Reed Investments away from traditional banking," Zoe noted. "They've been acquiring minority stakes in defense contractors." Maya watched her children analyze Jason Reed as they would any business competitor, without emotion, without attachment. She had raised them to understand their history without being defined by it. "If he approaches us," Maya said, "we remain professional and composed. This is our evening of celebration, not his." Thomas squared his shoulders. "He has no right to approach you, Mom, not after what he did." Maya reached for his hand. "He may have abandoned us, but in doing so, he inadvertently gave us the freedom to become who we are today. Without his rejection, I might never have taken the risks that built WDT." "The paradox of negative catalysts resulting in positive outcomes," Marcus murmured. "Fascinating." "What if he tries to establish some kind of relationship with us?" Zoe asked, the question that hung unspoken in the air. Maya considered this carefully. "That choice would be yours to make. You're old enough to decide what relationships you want in your life." "We already have everything we need," Thomas said firmly. "He made his choice 15 years ago." Maya stood, smoothing her uniform. "Then we proceed as planned. This evening is about celebrating what we've built together, the Wilson legacy." As they prepared to leave, Maya caught a glimpse of her reflection alongside her children. The contrast between her past and present couldn't be more stark. From a terrified pregnant student abandoned in a cafe to the commanding officer and CEO being honored by the nation's military establishment, flanked by 3 exceptional young people who carried her name and her determination. They moved toward the elevator, a unit forged through adversity and triumph. Maya's phone chimed again. Another message from her assistant confirming the seating arrangements had been finalized. "The Secretary of Defense has requested you be seated at his table," she told the triplets. "Apparently he's quite interested in Marcus's quantum encryption theories." The elevator doors opened to reveal the hotel's luxurious lobby. As they walked toward the waiting car, heads turned to observe the striking family, the distinguished officer and the 3 remarkably poised teenagers who moved with the confidence that came from knowing exactly who they were and what they had overcome. While the Wilson family entered the limousine that would take them to the ceremony, across town Jason Reed adjusted his Hermes tie, completely unaware that in a few hours he would face not just the woman he had discarded as inadequate, but 3 extraordinary teenagers whose amber eyes, the genetic Reed marker, would confront him like mirrors of an alternative life that could have been his. While the Wilson family entered the limousine that would take them to the ceremony, across town Jason Reed adjusted his Hermes tie, completely unaware that in a few hours he would face not just the woman he had discarded as inadequate, but 3 extraordinary teenagers whose amber eyes, the genetic Reed marker, would confront him like mirrors of an alternative life that could have been his. The grand ballroom of the Willard Intercontinental Hotel glittered with the collected power of America's military and industrial elite. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over dress uniforms adorned with medals, designer gowns, and bespoke suits. Maya Wilson stepped through the entrance with the triplets flanking her, their arrival causing a subtle ripple of recognition through the crowd. Her lieutenant colonel's uniform, with its precisely arranged medals and insignia, commanded immediate respect. "Lieutenant Colonel Wilson." The Secretary of Defense approached immediately, extending his hand. "The guest of honor arrives. These must be the remarkable young Wilsons I've heard so much about." Maya smiled, her posture perfect. "Mr. Secretary, may I present Thomas, Marcus, and Zoe?" Thomas shook the secretary's hand with military precision. Marcus offered a brief analysis of the secretary's recent policy speech on quantum security initiatives. Zoe inquired thoughtfully about the implementation timeline for next-generation aerospace defense systems. The secretary looked impressed. "I see brilliance runs in the family." Across the ballroom, Jason Reed entered with his 3rd wife, Veronica, a former model whose youth made the age gap between them impossible to ignore. At 45, Jason had maintained the fit physique and confident bearing of old money, though new lines of stress marked the corners of his eyes. His tuxedo, custom-made in London, represented the unquestioned privilege that had defined his existence. "Remember, we need to make connections with the defense sector players," he murmured to Veronica. "Reed Investments needs to diversify beyond traditional banking." "Of course, darling," she replied, scanning the room for celebrities rather than military officials. Jason froze mid-step when he spotted a familiar profile across the room. The years fell away as he recognized Maya Wilson, engaged in animated conversation with a 4-star general. The awkward scholarship student from the Bronx had transformed into a commanding presence at the center of a circle of admirers. The change was so profound that Jason momentarily doubted his own memory. "Do you know her?" Veronica asked, noting his sudden stillness. "Someone from a long time ago," he muttered, reaching for a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Maya moved through the pre-ceremony reception with practiced ease, introducing the triplets to key figures in the defense establishment. Generals sought Thomas's thoughts on military academy preparation. MIT professors already familiar with Marcus's published work engaged him in discussions of quantum computing applications. NASA executives expressed interest in Zoe's propulsion system designs. Jason observed from a distance, unable to approach, yet unable to look away. When Maya laughed at something a senator said, the sound carried across the room, stirring memories he'd long suppressed. He watched as she placed a protective hand on Zoe's shoulder, noting the girl's striking features. And then he saw them. The eyes. Amber eyes identical to his own, not just on the girl but on all three teenagers surrounding Maya. The champagne glass nearly slipped from his fingers. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The award ceremony is about to begin, announced the Master of Ceremonies. Guests moved toward the elegantly set tables. Jason found himself seated with a clear view of the stage, his heart pounding unnaturally fast as he calculated dates in his head. 15 years. The teenagers would be 15 years old. The Master of Ceremonies approached the podium. Good evening, distinguished guests. Tonight we honor exceptional contributions to our nation's defense capabilities. It is my privilege to begin with our highest honor. A video presentation began on large screens, showcasing Wilson Defense Technologies' innovations and their impact on American military operations. The narrator's voice filled the ballroom. From a small startup founded on a kitchen table to a $3 billion enterprise employing over 4,000 Americans, WDT has revolutionized how we protect our servicemen and women. The screen displayed footage of Maya in earlier years working alongside military personnel, demonstrating equipment, accepting her first major contract. Then came images of the triplets at various ages, always by her side at company milestones. Jason stared, transfixed, as the evidence mounted before his eyes. The resemblance was undeniable. The set of their jaws, the shape of their eyes, even the way Thomas tilted his head in concentration mirrored Jason's own mannerisms. It is with immense pride that we call to the stage the extraordinary Lieutenant Colonel Maya Wilson, accompanied by her children, the young prodigies Thomas, Marcus, and Zoe Wilson, to receive the Award for Excellence in Military Innovation. The spotlight found Maya and the triplets as they rose from their table. The audience erupted in applause as they moved toward the stage with synchronized grace. Jason felt a cold sweat break across his forehead as he watched, really saw, the children he had dismissed as a problem 15 years ago. General Armstrong, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, stepped forward with the medal. The nation owes Lieutenant Colonel Wilson a debt that cannot be quantified. Her innovations have saved more than 800 American lives in conflict zones. The medal was pinned to Maya's uniform as the triplets stood tall beside her, their pride evident in their posture. When the applause subsided, Maya approached the microphone. "It is an honor to be here tonight with my children," she began, her voice clear and confident, who grew up hearing that a person's worth isn't measured by their surname or bank account, but by the battles they face with dignity. Jason flinched, the words striking with precision. He barely noticed when Veronica whispered, "What's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost." On stage, Maya continued, "When I founded Wilson Defense Technologies, I had 3 6-month-old babies and an idea that could save lives. Every expert told me it was impossible to build a company while raising triplets alone. They were wrong." The audience laughed appreciatively, unaware of the knife twisting in Jason's gut. He watched, paralyzed, as the triplets smiled at their mother, his amber eyes looking back at him from 3 faces that could have been part of his life. As Maya spoke of resilience and innovation, Jason noticed something even more disturbing. People were looking between him and the triplets on stage. A senator seated at his table leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "The Wilson kid's eyes, identical to Jason Reed's, don't you think?" The colleague studied Jason, then the teenagers, his eyebrows rising in realization. Remarkable resemblance, and the timing would be right. The whispers spread like ripples in a pond. By the time Maya concluded her speech to thunderous applause, Jason felt exposed, as if every person in the room had pieced together the puzzle. During the reception that followed, Jason struggled to maintain his composure while fielding increasingly pointed questions about his connection to Wilson Defense Technologies. Unable to resist any longer, he maneuvered through the crowd toward Maya, who stood surrounded by admirers, the triplets never far from her side. When a momentary opening appeared, Jason stepped forward, extending his hand. "Lieutenant Colonel Wilson, Jason Reed of Reed Investments. I believe we knew each other many years ago in New York. Congratulations on your award." The surrounding conversations quieted. Maya turned, meeting Jason's eyes directly for the first time in 15 years. Her expression revealed nothing, no surprise, no anger, only a calculated calm. "Mr. Reed, how unexpected." Jason's gaze moved involuntarily to the triplets, who had closed ranks around their mother. "Your children are impressive," he managed, staring into 3 pairs of eyes identical to his own. Marcus stepped forward, analytical gaze assessing Jason like a specimen. "We know your history, Mr. Reed. Mother taught us that your greatest gift was removing yourself from our lives so we could be raised by someone truly exceptional." Jason paled. "You know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are," Thomas replied, his posture mirroring military readiness. "And more importantly, we know who you are not." Maya watched the exchange with serene detachment. "My children know the entire truth, Jason, including the check you gave me to solve the problem." Jason struggled to regain control of the situation. "Maya, perhaps we could speak privately. It's been a long time and—" "Lieutenant Colonel Wilson," Zoe interrupted with cutting politeness. "My mother earned that title serving our country, sir." The Secretary of Defense approached, oblivious to the tension. "Wilson, we need to discuss the details of that $1.7 billion contract. If you could join us?" Jason stood frozen as Maya and the triplets walked away, surrounded by figures of real power. Not the illusory power of Wall Street, but people who shaped national security. "They have your eyes, Mr. Reed," Senator Thompson whispered as he passed. "But thank God they have their mother's heart. America is stronger for it." While the echoes of the senator's words hung in the air, Jason remained rooted in place, watching the retreating figures of the family that could have been his, suddenly understanding that Maya Wilson hadn't just built a defense company. She had created a legacy that would endure long after the Reed name was forgotten. "They have your eyes, Mr. Reed," Senator Thompson whispered as he passed. "But thank God they have their mother's heart. America is stronger for it." The senator's words hung in the air like a verdict as Jason stood frozen, watching Maya and the triplets disappear into the crowd of admirers. The glass of bourbon in his hand trembled slightly, amber liquid sloshing against crystal in the same distinctive shade as the eyes that had just stared back at him, accusing, analyzing, dismissing. The reception continued around him, a symphony of power and influence that normally energized Jason. Tonight, it felt like white noise. His third wife, Veronica, materialized at his side, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she clutched his arm. "Who was that woman? You look like you've seen a ghost," she whispered, her practiced smile never faltering for the benefit of onlookers. "An old acquaintance," Jason managed, his throat unexpectedly dry. "And those teenagers with her? The ones everyone's talking about?" Veronica pressed, her instincts for social undercurrents finely tuned after 3 years of navigating Washington's elite circles as Mrs. Reed. Before Jason could formulate a response that wouldn't implode his evening, a silver-haired woman approached them, her expression alight with the particular gleam of someone possessing valuable gossip. "Jason Reed! I didn't realize you had a connection to the Wilson family," she said, her voice pitched to carry just far enough to nearby tables. "Those children are extraordinary. The oldest already accepted to West Point, the middle one publishing papers on quantum physics at 14, and the daughter with that revolutionary propulsion system design." Jason forced a smile. We're old acquaintances from New York." "More than acquaintances, I'd say," the woman replied with a knowing look at the retreating figures of the triplets. "Those Reed eyes don't lie. My husband and I were just remarking on it. Splitting image of you, all three of them." Veronica's fingers dug into Jason's arm with increasing pressure. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes had turned to ice. Across the ballroom, Maya stood with General Hayes and the Secretary of Defense, discussing the details of a classified communication system deployment. The triplets remained nearby, Thomas engaged in conversation with a West Point commander, Marcus discussing theoretical physics with a Nobel laureate, and Zoe fielding questions about her engineering designs from NASA officials. "They're coming back this way," Zoe murmured to her mother during a brief pause in conversations. Maya didn't need to ask who they were. She could feel Jason's gaze from across the room, could track his movement through the crowd by the ripple of whispers that followed in his wake. She had prepared for this moment for 15 years, yet the reality of it sent a brief tremor through her steady hands. "Stay close if you wish, or continue your conversations," Maya told her children quietly. "This is your evening too." The triplets exchanged glances, that silent communication that had always fascinated observers. Without a word, they shifted positions, not hovering protectively, but strategically positioned nearby, giving their mother space while remaining within easy reach. Jason approached with Veronica still clutching his arm, his expression a complex mixture of shock, curiosity, and something that might have been regret. "Lieutenant Colonel Wilson," he began again, his voice steadier now. "I wonder if we might speak privately for a moment." Maya regarded him with clinical detachment. "I'm afraid my schedule this evening is quite full, Mr. Reed. As you can see, we're discussing matters of national security." The dismissal was elegant but unmistakable. Jason flushed slightly, unaccustomed to being denied. "These children," he pressed, lowering his voice but not enough to prevent nearby ears from straining to hear. "They're 15, aren't they?" "An excellent calculation," Marcus interjected, stepping closer. "Your mathematical skills appear adequate, at least for basic arithmetic." A few onlookers failed to suppress their chuckles. Jason's flush deepened. Veronica's eyes darted between Jason and the triplets, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning comprehension to horror. "Jason," she hissed, "what exactly is happening here?" Before Jason could respond, General Hayes cleared his throat. "Lieutenant Colonel Wilson, the Joint Chiefs are particularly interested in your assessment of the quantum encryption protocols. Perhaps you could elaborate?" Maya nodded professionally. "Of course, General. The Wilson Protocol, as we've designated it, represents a significant advance in unhackable communications." She turned slightly toward Marcus. "My son could actually provide more insight into the theoretical underpinnings, if you're interested." The strategic name drop of "my son" landed precisely as intended. Jason winced visibly. "Remarkable family," commented a silver-haired congressman who had drifted into their circle. 3 brilliant children raised by a single mother while she built a multi-billion-dollar company and served her country. Puts the rest of us to shame, doesn't it? "Indeed," agreed his companion, giving Jason a pointed look. "Makes one wonder about the father who missed out on such extraordinary children." The conversation swirled around them, the undercurrents of speculation growing stronger with each exchange. Jason stood rigid, trapped in a nightmare of his own making, watching as Maya and the triplets commanded the respect and admiration of the nation's most powerful figures. Respect that had nothing to do with inherited wealth or family connections. "I think I need some air," Veronica suddenly announced, her social smile cracking at the edges. Without waiting for Jason, she turned and moved purposefully toward the terrace doors. Jason hesitated, torn between following his retreating wife and continuing this excruciating encounter. Before he could decide, Zoe stepped forward, her amber eyes, his eyes, regarding him with penetrating clarity. "Your wife seems upset, Mr. Reed," she observed with perfect politeness. "Perhaps you should attend to her rather than disrupting our evening further." The dismissal from a 14-year-old girl struck Jason like a physical blow. He looked to Maya, finding no ally in her composed expression. "This isn't over," he said quietly, intended for Maya's ears alone. "It was over 15 years ago," she replied evenly, "when you wrote that check." As Jason retreated toward the terrace, conversation resumed seamlessly around Maya and the triplets. If the encounter had rattled her at all, she showed no sign of it, continuing her discussion with the general as if there had been no interruption. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Maya found Senator Thompson at her elbow. "Quite the drama tonight," he commented, nodding toward the exit where Jason and Veronica had departed an hour earlier, their body language screaming marital discord. "Reed's wife has been making calls from the terrace. Word is she's contacting divorce attorneys." Maya maintained her professional demeanor. "The personal affairs of the Reed family are not my concern, Senator." Thompson chuckled. "Very diplomatic, Lieutenant Colonel. But between us, it couldn't happen to a more deserving fellow. The stories I've heard about his business practices..." He shook his head. "His company's been trying to muscle into defense contracts for months, throwing money around, making promises they can't keep. No integrity." As the Wilsons rode back to their hotel in the silent comfort of their limousine, Thomas finally broke the quiet. "He seemed smaller than I expected." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "There's a psychological phenomenon where figures from our imagination often seem diminished when encountered in reality." "He wasn't in my imagination," Maya clarified. "He was in my past. There's a difference." Zoe rested her head on her mother's shoulder, a rare gesture of vulnerability from the increasingly independent teenager. "Are you okay, Mom?" Maya wrapped an arm around her daughter, pulling her close. "More than okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with exactly who I'm supposed to be with." While observing Maya's serene expression, none of the triplets realized that the evening's confrontation was merely the beginning, not the end, of Jason Reed's desperate attempts to insert himself into their lives, nor that in the coming days, a Washington Post headline would send shockwaves through Wall Street and transform their private family history into very public speculation. While observing Maya's serene expression, none of the triplets realized that the evening's confrontation was merely the beginning, not the end, of Jason Reed's desperate attempts to insert himself into their lives, nor that in the coming days, a Washington Post headline would send shockwaves through Wall Street and transform their private family history into very public speculation. The headline appeared 48 hours after the awards ceremony, splashed across the front page of the Washington Post's Sunday edition. "The Mother Warrior: How Maya Wilson Built a Defense Empire While Raising Genius Triplets." The accompanying photograph showed Maya in her dress uniform, flanked by Thomas, Marcus, and Zoe, their amber eyes unmistakable against the monochrome backdrop of the Wilson Defense Technologies logo. Jason Reed stared at the newspaper spread across his kitchen island, coffee growing cold beside him. The article never explicitly named him as the father, but the insinuations were clear enough. Abandoned by the father before birth, a prominent financial scion who deemed the pregnancy an inconvenience, offered money to make the problem go away. His own words from 15 years ago thrown back at him in black and white. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. Board members, concerned investors, social connections, all suddenly questioning the character of the man they thought they knew. On his laptop, stock tickers showed Reed Investments down 4% in pre-market trading, while Wilson Defense Technologies had jumped 7% following announcements of their latest NATO contract. Veronica had left yesterday, taking only 2 suitcases and leaving behind a coldly worded note explaining that she wouldn't be party to such public humiliation. Her attorney would be in touch. Jason scrolled through his phone, finding Maya's contact information procured through connections. His third unanswered message read simply, "We need to talk." This affects both of us." Her response, when it finally came, wasn't from her personal number, but from a corporate email address. "Mr. Reed, Lieutenant Colonel Wilson has no interest in personal communications. All further correspondence should be directed to Harrington, Mackenzie, and Palmer, legal representatives for the Wilson family." Jason hurled his phone across the room, the expensive device cracking against the marble fireplace. The control he'd maintained his entire life was unraveling spectacularly. His third marriage collapsing, his company's stock plummeting, and whispers spreading through the financial community about the man who'd abandoned his own children who had grown to become the kind of prodigies every dynasty dreamed of producing. 3 days of desperate maneuvering through mutual connections finally yielded results. A breakfast meeting at the Hay Adams Hotel, neutral territory with enough privacy to avoid further public spectacle. Jason arrived 30 minutes early, selecting a table with his back to the wall, controlling the environment as he'd been taught since childhood. Maya arrived precisely on time, not a minute early or late. Her transition from military uniform to civilian attire did nothing to diminish her commanding presence. The tailored charcoal suit she wore spoke of understated wealth, quality without ostentation, power without peacocking. 15 minutes, Jason, she said, sliding into the chair across from him. That's what I can offer between meetings. Gone was any trace of the vulnerable scholarship student he'd dismissed years ago. This woman operated on her own terms entirely. "Those are my children, Maya," Jason began, leaning forward with intensity. "I have rights." "No, you don't," she interrupted, her calm voice belying the steel beneath. "You renounced any rights when you handed me a check to solve the problem. I have witnesses, I have the torn check I kept, and I have 15 years of complete absence to prove abandonment. Things were different then. I was young, scared." "As was I," Maya countered. "Pregnant with triplets, abandoned, without resources. The difference is that you chose to run, and I chose to face it." Jason shifted tactics, sensing the futility of his initial approach. They deserved to know their father, their heritage. Maya's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "What heritage, Jason? Financial? My children are heirs to Wilson Defense Technologies. Thomas will have his own military commission soon. Marcus already has 2 registered patents at 14. Zoe was accepted to Harvard as the top candidate from the East Coast this year. What heritage could you offer that surpasses what they've already built through their own merit?" Each achievement she listed struck Jason like physical blows. The kind of children the Reed dynasty had always hoped he would produce, brilliant, accomplished, poised for extraordinary futures, had grown up without a penny of Reed money or influence. "I've changed, Maya," he tried, his voice softer now. "I'm not that man anymore." "That's irrelevant to us," she replied, checking her watch. "We don't harbor resentment, Jason. We simply moved forward. We built a life that doesn't include you, not out of vengeance, but because we never needed you." The silence that followed was deafening. Around them, Washington power brokers conducted morning meetings, oblivious to the life-altering conversation at the corner table. "The children," Jason began again, "they have my eyes. A genetic coincidence, nothing more." "They have Reed blood," he insisted, "whether you acknowledge it or not. Biology isn't destiny, Jason. If it were, you'd be half the man your father was, and I'd still be cleaning houses like my mother." Maya gathered her portfolio, preparing to leave. "Our time is up. I have a video conference with NATO European Command in 5 minutes." Jason made one final desperate attempt. "They are Reeds as much as they are Wilsons." Maya looked at him with something approaching pity. "No, Jason. They are Wilsons in every aspect that matters. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a world to change." She walked away without looking back, leaving Jason alone with his cooling coffee and collapsing world. Through the hotel window, he watched her slide into a waiting car, already engaged on her phone, moving forward as she had been doing since the day he walked away. That evening, Jason sat alone in his Georgetown penthouse, the divorce papers from Veronica's attorney on the coffee table beside him. On his laptop screen, he'd pulled up the Forbes profile of Maya and the triplets. They stood together, a perfect unit, their body language revealing a bond forged through years of shared struggle and triumph. He poured himself another bourbon, the amber liquid catching the light, the same distinctive shade as the eyes that connected him irrevocably to three young people who wanted nothing to do with him. The cruelest irony was that these children represented exactly what the Reed family had always valued: intelligence, ambition, exceptional talent. His father would have adored them, would have seen them as the perfect Reed heirs. Instead, they were Wilsons. Maya had given them her name, her values, her strength. And in doing so, she had created something more valuable than anything the Reed fortune could have purchased. The next morning brought news that Maya Wilson had signed the largest contract in WDT history, a $2 billion deal to provide advanced communication systems to American and allied forces. The stock surge made her personal net worth exceed Jason's for the first time. As he stared at the notification on his phone, Jason finally understood the magnitude of what he had lost. Not just the woman he had dismissed as inadequate, not just the children he had rejected as inconvenient, but the extraordinary future they had built without him. A future more meaningful than all his financial machinations. While Jason faced the ruins of his third marriage and the scrutiny of disappointed shareholders, Maya Wilson prepared to sign the largest contract in her company's history, surrounded by the children who were her true triumph, a legacy built not with money or family name, but with courage, determination, and unconditional love. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.